joining our discussion now is Michael Avenatti, attorney for Stormy Daniels. And Michael, I think history is going to show that you led us and the investigators to this point today, that Michael Cohen would not be pleading guilty possibly to anything today if you had not taken Stormy Daniels' case and showed her the way that she could find her voice in this, the voice that Michael Cohen now confesses in federal court to illegally have tried to silence.
Well, you know, I think, Lawrence, that my client deserves a lot of gratitude from a lot of people in America for her courage and her fortitude that she has shown over the last 5 to 6 months, frankly. You know, today was a very interesting day in the history of the presidency in the United States. This was the first time that you had an individual stand up in a court of law and basically point the finger at the president credibly and claim that the president was a co-conspirator in criminal conduct. You know, I think we're in the second quarter of a 4-quarter game. I think there's a lot of additional information that's going to come down the pike. You know, the problem for the president, he's got a lot of problems, but one of the problems is for Donald Trump is that so much of this now is out of his control because you have Paul Manafort and Michael Cohen. They're going to be looking to protect themselves and their families. They're not going to care a lot about what Donald Trump has to say, and I think that they're both going to disclose quite a bit.
Rudy Giuliani issued a written statement tonight saying there is no allegation of any wrongdoing against the president in the government's charges against Mr. Cohen. It is clear that, as the prosecutor noted, Mr. Cohen's actions reflect a pattern of lies and dishonesty over a significant period of time. Your reaction to Rudy Giuliani?
You know, Lawrence, I mean, it just gets more comical by the day. I mean, the truth isn't the truth. You know, this is, if you look at the statement, it's a parsed statement. He's playing word games relating to government charges. The American people can read these documents. They're available online. You've noted them tonight. It's clear as day what Michael Cohen has said, that the president told him and conspired with him to do these acts.
And the sequence in the courtroom today, the prosecutor said it first. The prosecutor made a presentation saying that this was done at the direction of the candidate, and then Michael Cohen said it even more emphatically with his own words when it was his turn.
You're absolutely right, Lawrence. And, you know, I sat in this chair that John's in on at least 2, if not 3 occasions on your show, and you showed the Air Force One tape of the President of the United States standing on the People's Plane, and when he was asked by the Associated Press reporter if he knew anything about the payment, he denied all knowledge, and here's the kicker. He pointed everybody to his personal attorney, Michael Cohen, and told them, go ask Michael Cohen the facts. Michael Cohen will tell you the facts. Well, guess what? In that courtroom here today, we learned the facts, according to Michael Cohen. And now Rudy Giuliani and the president are going to claim, no, don't ask Michael Cohen the facts because he doesn't know what he's talking about.
I want to go to a very important point that the prosecutor made. I mentioned it earlier in the program about the evidence that the prosecution has to prove Michael Cohen's guilt on all of these counts. And on the 2 counts involving Donald Trump ordering him to commit the campaign finance crime, they said that their evidence includes, quote, audio recordings made by Mr. Cohen. You have been saying for a long time that there are a lot more Michael Cohen recordings and that they are a lot more problematic for the president. So is that an indication that the federal government, the prosecutors, have recordings of Michael Cohen and Donald Trump discussing these 2 particular crimes?
I think it is, and I also think that there's additional recordings. I know there's additional recordings relating to conversations that Michael Cohen had with Keith Davidson relating to these 2 payments. There's a lot of recordings out there.
And Keith Davidson was Stormy Daniels' original lawyer, and he was involved in the other payoff through the National Enquirer.
That's correct. Keith Davidson served as a counsel for Miss McDougal and for the counsel for Miss Daniels before I took over her case. And so I think that this notation is a reference to those recordings. I mean, Lawrence, again, we're in the second quarter of a 4-quarter game. This president's in trouble. And we're coming for him because I'm going to take his deposition under oath. We're going to get Michael Cohen's.
The president's deposition.
The president's deposition. We're going to get Michael Cohen's deposition under oath. And I'm anxious to disclose all of this evidence to the American people so they can determine who's been lying to them and who's been telling the truth.
And that's because your civil suit to obtain Stormy Daniels' release from the non-disclosure agreement is still active, and that's where the deposition would be. Is Michael Cohen, to your knowledge, cooperating with Robert Mueller?
I do not know the answer to that question, but I know that he's cooperating with SDNY.
And why today did he go into court and plead guilty without an actual sentencing agreement already obtained, or any real agreement obtained as to what his future is? There's no promises about his future in this agreement. If he's cooperating, why didn't they make a deal with him now?
Well, because I think that the prosecutors want to see the extent of the cooperation, right? So this is the hammer. A lot of people have noted, well, there's nothing in writing requiring him to cooperate. That is true. However, prosecutors have the ultimate hammer as it relates to sentencing, because they're going to know at the time of sentencing in December the level of cooperation that he's provided during the preceding 3 or 4 months. So they have the ultimate hammer. So that's why they don't necessarily need anything in writing requiring his cooperation. But the prosecutors would have never entered this deal if they did not have some confidence that he was going to provide information. Now, it depends what they do with that information. They can take the information in and ultimately not do anything with it.
Where would we be tonight if Stormy Daniels never found you as a lawyer, and if you never found the way to make her story public, to bring her onto interviews like 60 Minutes and the own interviews that you have done, to make to the focus on exactly how this non-disclosure agreement was executed? Where would we be if Stormy Daniels and you had never come forward?
Well, Lawrence, I don't think we would be in this exact spot, but you know, I don't want to speculate as to where we would be. I'm going to let you and others speculate as to that. I mean, I think you know, I think we're in a better place because of the courage and fortitude of Stormy Daniels.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.